I am Marcus, 32 years old, and for 3 years, I sent $2,000 monthly to support my widowed mother back in Nebraska. I never imagined my hard-earned money was funding my sister Brooke and her husband Ryan's luxury lifestyle while Mom lived in the same crumbling house. When I discovered the betrayal, I made a decision that would change everything. I cut them off without warning and watched as their carefully constructed facade crumbled to dust. Before I share how my family's carefully constructed house of cards came tumbling down, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if family betrayal stories make your blood boil. I grew up in Millbrook, Nebraska, a town so small most GPS systems struggle to locate it. My childhood home was modest but comfortable, a simple 2-bedroom ranch house with faded blue siding that my father Robert had painted himself 3 separate times over the decades. Dad worked at the local manufacturing plant, putting in 60-hour weeks to keep food on our table. My mother Patricia worked part-time at the elementary school cafeteria, which allowed her to be home when my sister Brooke and I returned from school. Despite having limited financial resources, my parents emphasized the importance of education. Dad would often say, "Your brain is the one investment that always pays dividends." I took this advice to heart, spending evenings studying while many of my classmates were out socializing. Brooke, 2 years younger than me, took a different approach to life. Where I was reserved and academically focused, she was outgoing and socially driven. Our parents never explicitly favored either of us, but looking back, I can see how Brooke learned early on that her charm could often get her what she wanted. Everything changed when I was 17. Dad came home from work complaining about heartburn, went to lie down, and never got up again. The massive heart attack left no time for goodbyes, no opportunity for final words of wisdom. One day he was there solid, as the Nebraska oak tree in our backyard, and the next he was gone, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. The financial impact was immediate and severe. Dad's life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses and 3 months of mortgage payments. Mom suddenly had to work 2 jobs waitressing at the local diner in the evenings after her cafeteria shift. I watched her age 5 years in those first few months, coming home with swollen feet and dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep seemed to erase. "You focus on your studies, Marcus," she would insist whenever I offered to drop out and work full-time. "Getting your scholarship is our way out of this." I compromised by maintaining my grades while picking up weekend and evening work at the local grocery store. Between stocking shelves and bagging groceries, I managed to graduate as valedictorian and secure a full academic scholarship to the University of Washington. Brooke responded to our family tragedy differently. Rather than buckling down, she seemed to double down on her social aspirations. While I worked weekends, she was being crowned homecoming queen. When I was studying for scholarships, she was dating the captain of the football team. Mom never pushed her the way she pushed me, saying Brooke processed grief differently and needed social connections to heal. During my college years, I worked 3 different part-time jobs while maintaining my scholarship requirements. Summers were spent in internships rather than coming home building the foundation for my future career. Each semester break, I would return to find Mom looking more tired and Brooke becoming increasingly focused on material possessions. The contrast between my dorm room furnished with secondhand finds and Brooke's bedroom constantly updated with the latest trends didn't escape my notice. But I attributed it to Mom wanting to give Brooke some normalcy amid our care struggles. After graduating with honors in computer science, I landed a job at a major tech company in Seattle. My starting salary was 3 times what my father had ever made in his best year. The first thing I did after signing my contract was call Mom. "I want to send you money each month," I told her. "You worked yourself to the bone for us, and now it's my turn to help you." "Oh, Marcus, you don't need to do that," she protested, but I could hear the relief in her voice. $2,000 a month, I said firmly. "Use it to fix up the house, build your savings, whatever you need. You deserve to finally have some security." The gratitude in her voice convinced me I was doing the right thing. Each month, I dutifully transferred the money, feeling satisfaction, knowing I was helping ease her burden. Mom would send photos of supposed home improvements. New curtains here, a repainted wall. There, though in retrospect, The changes were minor compared to the substantial funds I was providing. Meanwhile, Brooke had met Ryan Phillips during her second year of community college. Ryan presented himself as a successful business entrepreneur with connections throughout the Midwest. He drove a BMW, wore tailored suits, and spoke constantly about his investment portfolio. I was immediately skeptical, but Mom was thoroughly charmed. "He's such a go-getter," she would tell me during our weekly calls. "He's going to give Brooke the life she deserves." When they announced their engagement after just 8 months of dating, I offered to help pay for the wedding as my gift to them. What I had expected to be a reasonable $15,000 affair somehow ballooned to $40,000, with my contribution tripling accordingly. I flew home for the event uncomfortable in my rented tuxedo, as I watched Brooke float down the aisle in a designer gown toward a man I barely knew. The reception was held at the most expensive venue in the county, with imported flowers, premium open bar, and a 7-tier cake. Throughout the evening, I noticed Ryan introducing himself to everyone as a strategic investment consultant, though he remained vague when I asked about his specific line of work. "The market is all about relationships and timing," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You tech guys think too linearly. Business is an art form." I should have recognized these empty platitudes for the red flags they were, but I was distracted by Brooke's apparent happiness and Mom's pride as she watched her daughter marry into what she perceived as success. As I flew back to Seattle, I dismissed my concerns, telling myself that at least Mom now had Brooke and Ryan nearby to help her as she aged. 8 months after Brooke's wedding, I finally had enough accumulated vacation days to make a proper visit home. I was excited to see the improvements to Mom's house that my financial support had supposedly funded. According to our conversations, she had repaired the roof, updated the kitchen appliances, and replaced the ancient furnace that had barely kept the house warm through Nebraska winters. The taxi from the airport dropped me at the familiar driveway, and I stood for a moment taking in the sight of my childhood home. My excitement quickly morphed into confusion. The house looked essentially unchanged, with the same peeling paint and sagging porch steps I remembered from my last visit. The roof, which had supposedly been repaired with $5,000 of my dollars, still had the same missing shingles and visible water damage along the eaves. When Mom opened the door and rushed to embrace me, I momentarily forgot my concerns, wrapped up in the familiar scent of her perfume and the genuine joy in her eyes. "Let me show you around," she said, after we'd settled my luggage in my old bedroom, which remained frozen in time with my high school football participation trophy and faded science fair ribbons still displayed on the dusty shelves. The grand tour revealed none of the renovations she had described in our calls. The kitchen still featured the same avocado green refrigerator that had been ancient when Dad was alive. The living room furniture was identical, though perhaps more worn. The bathroom faucet still dripped with the same rhythmic persistence I remembered from childhood. "Mom, I thought you were having work done on the house," I said carefully as we sat at the kitchen table with glasses of iced tea. She avoided my eyes, fidgeting with her napkin. "Oh, there have been so many delays. Contractors these days are just impossible to pin down. I paid deposits, but then they get busy with other projects." She quickly changed the subject, asking about my flight and work. That evening, Mom suggested we meet Brooke and Ryan for dinner at Riverside Grill, the most expensive restaurant in town. I was surprised by her choice, knowing it was well beyond what she could typically afford. When we arrived, Brooke and Ryan were already seated in a premium booth overlooking the river. The changes in my sister were immediately apparent. The Brooke I remembered wore simple, practical clothing and drove a used Honda with over 100,000 miles on the odometer. This version of my sister sparkled with diamond earrings and a tennis bracelet that caught the light with every gesture. Her previously shoulder-length brown hair now featured expensive-looking highlights and extensions. Ryan sat beside her in a designer suit, checking his gold watch periodically, as if he had more important places to be. Marcus Brooks squealed, standing to air kiss near my cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. The Seattle genius finally remembers his family exists. "Good to see you, tech guy," Ryan said, offering a firm handshake that felt more like a dominance display than a greeting. Still coding away for the corporate overlords. Throughout dinner, they dominated the conversation with stories of weekend getaways to Chicago, their recent kitchen renovation, with imported Italian marble, and Ryan's golf membership at the exclusive country club, 2 Counties. Over. When the bill came, Ryan made a show of placing his platinum credit card on the table. "I've got this," he insisted when I reached for my wallet. "It's the least we can do since you've been so generous with Patricia." His wording struck me as odd. Patricia, who calls their mother-in-law by her first name, and what did he mean by my generosity with her? Back at Mom's house, I helped her make up the couch for the night, and casually brought up the strange dynamics I had observed at dinner. "Brooke and Ryan seem to be doing very well," I remarked, fluffing a pillow that had seen better days. "Oh yes, Ryan's business connections are really paying off," Mom said, with a strange note of pride in her voice. "They just put in a home theater system that cost more than my first car." "That's quite an expense," I said carefully. "What exactly does Ryan do again?" "Investment consulting," Mom replied vaguely. "Very sophisticated stuff." The next morning I woke early and overheard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but her urgent whisper caught my attention. "Yes, Marcus's contribution came through yesterday," she was saying. "I can transfer it to you this afternoon." "No, he hasn't asked too many questions, but he noticed the house." I know I'll figure something out." When I entered the kitchen, she quickly ended the call and busied herself making breakfast, avoiding my questioning gaze. I wanted to confront her directly, but something held me back. Perhaps I wasn't ready to hear the truth. Or maybe I feared damaging our relationship with accusations I couldn't prove. Instead, I asked gently, "Mom, is everything okay with your finances? You know you can tell me if you need more help." Her reaction was immediate and defensive. "Everything's fine, Marcus. Just because I haven't spent every penny fixing up this old house doesn't mean there's a problem. You've been gone for years, flying off to your big city life. You don't get to swoop in for 3 days and question how I handle things." Her words stung, especially the implication that I had abandoned her. I backed off, apologizing for overstepping, and the remainder of my visit passed in stilted conversation and forced normalcy. When I boarded my flight back to Seattle, I felt a heaviness that wasn't just the weight of leaving home, but the nagging sense that something was seriously wrong with the financial support I had been providing. Despite my misgivings, I continued sending the monthly transfers. 2 months after my visit, Mom called claiming she needed an additional $1,000 for unexpected medical tests not covered by her insurance. I sent $3,000 that month, worried about her health and wanting to ensure she received proper care. She never mentioned the results of these supposed tests again. 6 months after my uncomfortable visit home, I received a Facebook message from Timothy Walsh, my best friend from high school. We had fallen out of regular contact over the years, with occasional birthday wishes and holiday greetings being the extent of our communication. His message was casual, but contained information that would ultimately change everything. "Saw your sister and her husband at Clearwater Resort last weekend," he wrote. "Must be nice to take 3 weekend trips a month." Ryan was telling everyone at the bar about his new boat. "Your family's really living large these days." I stared at the message, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Clearwater Resort was a luxury destination 4 hours from Millbrook, with rooms starting at $500 per night. 3 weekend trips a month. A new boat. None of this aligned with what I knew of Ryan's vague business ventures, or with the modest lifestyle my mother claimed to be living. After a sleepless night, I made a decision that felt both necessary and slightly underhanded. When I had initially set up the monthly transfers to my mother, I had created a joint account to simplify the process. I had never checked the account activity, trusting that Mom was using the funds as she claimed. Now, I logged in and examined the transaction history. What I discovered sent waves of shock and betrayal washing over me. Within 1 to 3 days of each of my deposits, large sums were being transferred to another account. The recipient name on these transfers, Brooke Phillips. Over the past year, nearly 80% of the money I had sent for Mom's well-being and home repairs had been funneled directly to my sister and her husband. I scrolled through month after month of transactions, each one deepening my sense of betrayal. The extra money I had sent for Mom's supposed medical tests had been withdrawn the very next day, followed by a purchase at a high-end electronics store in a neighboring town. The next evening, Mom called as she did every Sunday. I struggled to maintain a normal conversation, my mind racing with questions and accusations I wasn't yet ready to voice. "Marcus, honey," she said near the end of our call, her voice taking on the worried tone, I now recognized as the prelude to a financial request. The roof is in really bad shape. The last storm caused some serious leaks in the hallway and spare bedroom. I got an estimate, and it's going to cost about $5,000 to fix properly. The roof. The same roof that was supposedly repaired with my money a year earlier. I took a deep breath, deciding to probe gently. That's a significant repair, I said carefully. Can you send me the contractor's estimate? Maybe I can review it, and see if the price is reasonable. Her hesitation was brief but noticeable. Oh, he just wrote it up by hand while he was here, but he comes highly recommended by Ryan, so I'm sure it's fair. I'd still like to see it, I insisted. And I'd like the contractor's name and number, so I can ask some questions about the work they're planning. Marcus, if you don't want to help, just say so, Mom replied, her voice taking on an injured tone. I can try to take out a loan, though. At my age and income, the interest would be terrible. The manipulation was so transparent now that I was looking for it. Still, I decided to play along while continuing my investigation. No, Mom, of course I'll help. I'll send the $5,000 tomorrow. Just please get me the contractor's information when you can. After we hung up, I spent several hours researching roofing costs in Nebraska. For a house the size of Mom's, even a complete replacement should cost between $8,000 and $12,000. A repair of the scale she described would typically run between $2,000 and $3,000. The $5,000 figure was either padded or entirely fabricated. The next day I sent the money as promised, but with a specific note in the transfer. For roof repair only. Please send contractor details and receipt. 3 days later, I checked the account. As I now expected, $4,000 had already been transferred to Brooke's account. That evening, Brooke posted photos on social media of her new home theater system, complete with reclining leather seats and surround sound. The caption read, "Movie night upgrade, living our best life number. Blessed number, home theater goals." I could no longer deny the obvious. My mother was functioning as a financial conduit, redirecting my support to fund Brooke and Ryan's extravagant lifestyle. When I called Mom to inquire about the roof repair, she gave vague assurances that the contractor would be starting next week. When I pressed about the $4,000 transfer to Brooke, she finally admitted that Brooke had borrowed some of the money for a temporary emergency, but would pay it back before the roof work began. What kind of emergency requires exactly $4,000, I asked. You don't understand how hard things are for them right now, Mom replied defensively. Ryan's business is in a transitional phase, and they have certain obligations to maintain. Image is everything in his industry. So my sister's home theater system is a business expense, I asked incredulously. You've always been jealous of Brooke's social success, Mom snapped. Just because you choose to live like a hermit in Seattle doesn't mean everyone wants that kind of life. The conversation devolved from there, ending with Mom in tears and me feeling simultaneously angry and guilty, a combination I now recognize as the result of skilled emotional manipulation. That night, I sat down with a spreadsheet and calculated exactly how much money I had sent home over the 3 years since starting my job, $89,600. Based on the account transfers, I could see approximately $70,000 of that had gone directly to Brooke and Ryan. The thought made me physically ill. I was torn between family loyalty and the undeniable sense that I was being exploited. The money itself wasn't the issue. I had been happy to share my good fortune. It was the deception, the manipulation, and the realization that my mother was actively participating in what amounted to a long-term fraud against her own son. I requested emergency personal leave from work, citing a family crisis. My manager, seeing the distress on my face during our video call, approved 2 weeks without hesitation. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Nebraska, without informing my family of my arrival. This time, rather than staying with Mom, I contacted Timothy and asked if I could crash at his place for a few days. "Everything okay with your folks?" he asked when he picked me up at the airport. "That's what I'm here to find out," I replied grimly. The first phase of my investigation began with a drive past Mom's house. It was a Tuesday morning, and her car was gone, presumably because she was at work. I parked across the street and studied the property. The roof, which had now supposedly been funded for repairs twice, showed no signs of recent work or even preparations for construction. The same missing shingles and water damage were clearly visible. I approached the house next door, where Barbara Johnson, a retired teacher who had lived there for 40 years, was tending to her front garden. She recognized me immediately. Marcus. What a lovely surprise. Your mother didn't mention you were visiting. It's a bit of a surprise trip, I admitted. I actually wanted to check on the roof repairs. Mom mentioned there was significant damage. Barbara frowned. Roof repairs, I haven't seen any contractors here. And Patricia hasn't mentioned anything about it, which seems odd since she tells me about every bird that visits her feeder. Have you noticed if she's been having any financial difficulties? I asked carefully. Barbara's expression softened with sympathy. Well, dear, I wouldn't normally gossip, but since you're family, I have been a bit concerned. She mentioned taking out a small loan last year, which surprised me given how generously you support her. But then I see her shopping with Brooke at the mall nearly every weekend, carrying bags from those expensive stores. I assumed perhaps things had improved. I thanked Barbara and drove to the local mall, a modest collection of stores that served several surrounding counties. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot, feeling uncomfortably like a private investigator in a cheap movie. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, my patience was rewarded when I spotted Mom's car pulling into a space near the main entrance. Moments later, Brooke's white Mercedes SUV parked beside it. I watched from a distance as they met and embraced before heading inside. Using the baseball cap and sunglasses I had brought for this purpose, I followed them at a discreet distance. For the next 2 hours, I observed as they moved from store to store, purchasing clothing, accessories, and home goods, with apparently no concern for prices. At the jewelry counter in the department store, Mom purchased a watch that I could see, even from my vantage point, was well beyond what her cafeteria salary could support. When they finally headed to the parking lot, arms laden with shopping bags, I made my move. I approached just as Mom was loading her purchases into her trunk. Need help with those bags? I asked quietly. Mom froze her face, draining of color. Marcus, what are you doing here? Apparently watching my roof repair money being spent at the mall, I replied, keeping my voice even despite the anger and hurt churning inside me. Brooke stepped forward, her expression shifting from shock to defiance. You can't just show up and spy on us. That's creepy and controlling. And systematically lying to extract money, isn't? I countered, turning back to Mom. I think we need to talk. Now. We ended up at a coffee shop near the mall, the shopping bags stuffed hastily out of sight in their cars. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother truly cornered, without prepared excuses or deflections. How long has this been going on? I asked once we were seated in a quiet corner. How long have you been funneling my money to Brooke and Ryan? Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I had seen this tactical crying too many times now to be swayed by it. It's not how you're making it sound, she began. Brooke and Ryan just needed a little help while his business gets established. A little help to the tune of $70,000, I asked incredulously. Money that was meant for your needs, for fixing the house, for your retirement? You don't understand, Brooke interjected. Ryan has an image to maintain for his business contacts. If people knew we were struggling, his whole network would collapse. What business? I demanded. What exactly does Ryan do that requires my salary to support? The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice small. Ryan's investment firm had some setbacks, but he's very close to a major deal that will turn everything around. He's been very close for 3 years, I pointed out. Meanwhile, you're living in a house with a leaking roof and outdated appliances while funding their luxury lifestyle. Brooke deserves nice things, Mom said with sudden heat. She's always struggled with contentment, you know that. And it makes me happy to see her happy. Even at my expense. Even through systematic deception, I was struggling to understand the depth of this betrayal. Mom, what about your retirement? Have you saved anything from what I've sent? Her gaze dropped to the table. There's been so many expenses. For Brooke, not for you. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I would have helped Brooke if she'd asked directly. I might even have helped Ryan if he'd been honest about his business struggles. But this years of lies, manipulating me with fake emergencies and guilt trips. You abandoned us, Brooke said bitterly. You ran off to Seattle with your fancy job and only sent money to ease your conscience. You owe us more than just financial support. I stared at my sister, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. the entitlement, the justification, the complete lack of gratitude or self-awareness. And beside her, my mother, who had raised us both, but somehow fostered these toxic dynamics. I need some time to process this, I said, finally standing to leave. But things cannot continue as they have been. As I walked away, Mom called after me. Marcus, please. The money really does help us. I promise I'll use the next transfer for the roof for real this time. I didn't turn around, but those words confirmed what I needed to know. Despite being caught in their deception, they still expected the money to continue flowing. They had no real remorse, only regret at being discovered. I spent that night at Timothy's house pouring out the whole story as he listened with increasing disbelief. I knew they were living large, he said, but I had no idea it was on your dime. Man, that's beyond messed up. The worst part is that Mom seems to see nothing wrong with it. I replied, it's like Brooke's happiness is the only thing that matters, regardless of how it's achieved or who gets hurt in the process. The next morning I drove back to Mom's house for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. When I arrived, I was surprised to find Ryan's Mercedes in the driveway, alongside Mom's car. I steeled myself and knocked on the door. Ryan answered his usual smooth confidence, replaced by barely contained anger. Here to check up on your investment? He sneered. Mom appeared behind him looking tired and anxious. Please, both of you, let's just talk calmly. In the living room, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment before I spoke. I want to understand exactly what's been happening with the money I've been sending. I've been helping Brooke and Ryan through a difficult period, Mom said, as if this was a perfectly reasonable explanation for the systematic deception. Ryan's business is on the verge of a major breakthrough, she continued, but appearances matter in his field. They need to maintain certain standards to keep his contacts confident. And what exactly is this mysterious business? I pressed. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I connect investors with opportunities. The details are confidential. Confidential or non-existent? I asked pointedly. You think you're so much better than everyone because you code for some tech giant? Ryan snapped. Some of us are building something real, something of our own. With my money, I reminded him, money that was meant for Mom's well-being and security. I am secure, Mom insisted. I have my job, my house. Your leaking roof, your 40-year-old appliances, and apparently no retirement savings, I countered. Mom, what happens when you can't work anymore? What's the plan then? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. There was no plan beyond continuing to extract money from me indefinitely. I left that day with a heavy heart, fully understanding that my family viewed me primarily as a financial resource, rather than a person with feelings and boundaries. The betrayal cut deep, but it also brought clarity. I knew what I needed to do, though the path forward would not be easy. 1 week after returning to Seattle, still processing the revelations from my trip, I received a call from Mom. It was unusual for her to call midweek, and her voice carried a trembling urgency that immediately put me on alert. Marcus, I hate to ask this, but we have an emergency, she began. Brooke's in the hospital. They think it might be her appendix, and our insurance has a $10,000 deductible. Ryan's between investment cycles, and they just can't manage it right now. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. The familiar guilt and obligation washed over me, but this time I was prepared. Which hospital is she in? I asked calmly. Mom hesitated briefly. County General. They admitted her last night. What's the name of her doctor? Another pause. Dr. Richardson, I think. Marcus, they need the money right away. They won't perform the surgery without payment arrangements. That's not how emergency medical care works in America, Mom. They can't refuse treatment for acute conditions like appendicitis. I kept my voice level. Let me call the hospital to arrange the payment directly. No. The response came too quickly. I mean, it's better if you just transfer the money. There's paperwork and privacy issues with you calling. Mom, is Brooke actually in the hospital right now? The silence stretched uncomfortably before she responded. She's very ill, Marcus. Why would I lie about something like this? Because you and Brooke have been lying to me about everything else for 3 years, I replied softly. I'm going to call County General now. and asked to be connected to Brooke Phillips' room. Marcus, wait. I ended the call and immediately dialed the hospital. As I suspected, they had no patient registered under Brooke Phillips. I called Mom back immediately. There's no record of Brooke at County General, I said when she answered. Want to try again with the truth? It's possible they haven't updated their system yet. She attempted weakly. Mom, stop. Just stop. What's the real emergency? What's the $10,000 actually for? After a long pause, she sighed. Brooke and Ryan put a deposit on a vacation property at the lake. The balance is due this week, and their financing fell through. If they lose the deposit, that's $20,000 gone. I closed my eyes, absorbing yet another layer of deception. Put Brooke on the phone. Now. A few moments later, my sister's voice came through, not weak or pained, as someone with appendicitis would be, but irritated and defensive. Look, we didn't think you'd help with the vacation property, but it's a really good investment opportunity. So, you invented a medical emergency. I was struggling to keep my composure. Do you have any idea how disturbing that is? It's not like you can't afford it, Brooke snapped. You make so much money sitting at your computer all day. What's $10,000 to you? It's not about the amount, Brooke. It's about the lying, the manipulation, the complete lack of respect for me as a person, rather than a bank account. Oh, please, she scoffed. You send money to ease your guilt about abandoning us after Dad died. Don't pretend it's some selfless act of generosity. I heard rustling, and then Ryan's voice came on the line. Look, Marcus, we're family, and family helps each other. Your sister deserves this vacation property. Do you have any idea the stress she's under, maintaining our social connections while I build my business network? What business? Ryan. Seriously, what actual business do you run? I'm in high-level consulting and investment facilitation, he replied smoothly. The details are complex and confidential. They're non-existent, I countered. You're living off my income while pretending to be a successful businessman. How dare you, he sputtered. I've been building valuable connections that will pay off enormously. Just because it doesn't fit into your corporate cubicle mentality doesn't mean it's not real. Then pay for your own vacation property, I suggested. If you're on the verge of such success, surely you can secure legitimate financing. Mom came back on the line. Marcus, you're being selfish. Your sister and Ryan have built a life based on certain expectations. Their friends and contacts expect them to have certain things. If they suddenly start downsizing, people will ask questions. So the solution is to indefinitely fund a fake lifestyle with my money. Money that was meant for your security and well-being. I am secure, she insisted. Knowing Brooke is happy makes me happy. And what about me? Does my happiness factor into this equation at all? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Mom spoke in a tone that suggested she was being extremely reasonable. Of course we care about your happiness, but you're doing so well. You have everything you need. Brooke still needs help finding her footing. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A strange calm descended as I realized that this dynamic would never change unless I forced it to change. They would continue to manipulate, lie, and extract resources as long as I allowed it to happen. I understand, I said quietly. I can see that you're in a difficult position. I'll transfer the money tomorrow. The relief in Mom's voice was palpable. Thank you, Marcus. I knew you'd come through for us. You always do. After ending the call, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking through my next steps. This wasn't an impulsive decision made in anger, but a necessary boundary established after years of exploitation. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I had learned, creating a detailed spreadsheet of all the money I had sent and where it had actually gone. The next day, I met with my financial advisor to reorganize my banking completely. I closed the joint account with Mom and set up new secure accounts that no one else could access. I consulted briefly with a lawyer about my obligations and options going forward. You have no legal requirement to support your mother or sister, the lawyer confirmed. Any money you've provided was given as a gift, not as part of a contract or obligation. And if they've been systematically misleading me about the purpose of these gifts, I asked. That's morally reprehensible, but not legally actionable unless you can prove actual fraud. he explained. Your best approach is simply to cease providing financial support. That evening, I called Timothy back in Nebraska. Can I ask you a favor? Keep an eye on the situation with Mom and Brooke over the next few months. I'm about to make a change that will likely cause some drama. The Bank of Marcus is closing, he guessed. Effective immediately, I confirmed. But I'm not going to announce it. I want to see what happens when the money simply stops appearing. That's cold, man, Timothy said, though I could hear the approval in his voice. But after what they pulled, maybe cold is exactly what they need. The first month after I closed the joint account passed quietly. I had blocked the automatic transfers that had been going to Mom for 3 years, changed all my banking passwords, and removed her as an authorized user on my credit card, which I discovered had several recurring charges for Brooke's streaming services and monthly subscriptions. 10 days after my usual transfer date, I received a text from Mom. There seems to be a problem with the bank. Your monthly deposit didn't come through. I waited several hours. Before responding with deliberate vagueness, I'll look into it. 3 days later, Marcus, have you sorted out that banking issue? We're counting on that money for bills this month. Again, I was intentionally non-committal. Still working on it. Bank says it might be a system error. By the end of the month, the messages had grown more frequent and increasingly anxious. Marcus, we really need that deposit. Brooke and Ryan have payments due this week. I stopped responding entirely, which prompted a flurry of calls that I sent to voicemail. The messages they left revealed much about their true expectations and attitudes. This is incredibly irresponsible, Marcus' mom said in one message. We have financial commitments based on your support. Whatever technical issue you're having with the bank needs to be fixed immediately. Ryan's condescending voice informed me. Your sister is counting on that money. I can't believe you're doing this, Brooke sobbed in another message. We put a second deposit on the lake house because you said you'd help. Do you know how embarrassing it will be to back out now? As the second month without funds began, the tone of the messages shifted from entitled expectation to desperate pleading. Marcus, please. I don't know what's happened, but we really need your help. Mom's voice trembled. Ryan's investors are asking questions, and he might lose some important contracts if they sense financial instability. I maintained my silence, though each message twisted the knife of betrayal a little deeper. It wasn't that I enjoyed their distress, but I needed them to experience the natural consequences of their actions and choices. Meanwhile, through Timothy and social media, I observed the gradual unraveling of the lifestyle my money had been supporting. Timothy reported that Ryan's Mercedes had disappeared from their driveway, replaced by a much older model Toyota. Brooke's Instagram posts previously showcasing restaurant meals and shopping hauls became conspicuously infrequent. Midway through the second month, Mom finally admitted the truth in a lengthy voicemail. Marcus, I know. You know there was no medical emergency with Brooke. I shouldn't have lied about that, but we really do need your help. Ryan's business is struggling, and they've had to make some difficult adjustments. Please call me back so we can discuss this like adults. I didn't call back, but I did send a brief text. I'm taking some time to reevaluate our relationship and the financial dynamics that have developed. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. By the third month, the facade was crumbling visibly. Timothy reported that a for sale sign had appeared in front of Brooke and Ryan's large house. Their white Mercedes SUV was also listed on a local sales website. Mom had taken on additional hours at the school cafeteria and had started working weekends at the local grocery store, the same place I had worked as a teenager. Your mom looks exhausted, Timothy told me during one of our calls. Part of me feels bad for her, but then I remember how they've been using you all this time. I don't want her to suffer, I admitted. But she needs to understand that I'm not an unlimited resource to be channeled to Brooke and Ryan. In the fourth month, I received an email from Mom that was markedly different from her previous communications. Marcus, I understand now why you've stopped sending money. I was wrong to redirect your generosity to Brooke and Ryan without your knowledge or consent. I justified it by telling myself that helping them was helping me, since I worry about them so much. But that wasn't fair to you. I've taken a second job, and am learning to live within my actual means. When you're ready to talk, I would like to apologize properly and try to rebuild our relationship even if that never includes financial support again. It was the first acknowledgement of wrongdoing that wasn't immediately followed by another request for money. I didn't respond immediately, still cautious about being manipulated, but I saved the email as a possible sign of genuine change. Around the same time, rumors began circulating in Millbrook about Ryan's business dealings. According to Timothy, one of Ryan's supposed investors had discovered inconsistencies in his representations about his company's assets and client base. I had nothing to do with this, though I admit I felt a grim satisfaction that his house of cards was collapsing under its own weight. By the 5th month, Brooke and Ryan had sold their house and moved into a modest apartment. Ryan's carefully cultivated image as a successful businessman had been publicly damaged by questions about his actual income and assets. Brooke had taken a job at the mall, working at one of the very stores where she had once shopped with abandon using my money. Mom, true to her word, was supporting herself through her 2 jobs. She had stopped asking me for money entirely, though she sent occasional messages simply checking on my well-being. These messages were different, asking about my life and work, without the underlying current of financial expectation. In the 6th month after the cutoff, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I was surprised to hear Ryan's voice lacking its usual confident bluster. "Marcus, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," he began, "but I need to apologize. The way we used your generosity was wrong. I got caught up in projecting success I hadn't actually achieved, and it became a spiral I couldn't control." "What changed, Ryan?" I asked, genuinely curious about this apparent transformation. "Reality," he replied with a bitter laugh. "When your support stopped, everything I'd built on false pretenses collapsed. Brooke and I almost divorced over it. But hitting bottom made me realize I needed to build something real, not just an illusion of success." "And how's that going?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "I'm working as a sales associate at a car dealership," he said. "It's honest work, and I'm actually good at it. Not as glamorous as being an investment consultant, but I sleep better at night." These conversations, with their acknowledgments of wrongdoing and signs of actual change, marked the beginning of a potential healing process. I wasn't ready to fully trust any of them again, and I certainly wasn't ready to resume financial support. But for the first time, I could see a path forward that wasn't complete estrangement. Timothy kept me updated on the practical realities. "Your mom's roof finally got fixed," he reported. "She saved up and hired a local guy who did it for $2,800. She seems proud that she handled it herself." Brooke's social media transformed from showcasing material possessions to highlighting simple pleasures and moments with friends. Her most recent post read, "Learning that happiness isn't about what you have, but who you have in your life and how you spend your time. Number, gratitude, number life learnings." Whether these changes were permanent or merely adaptations to their new financial reality remained to be seen. But the system of deception and entitlement that had characterized our family dynamics for years had been fundamentally disrupted, and healthier patterns were at least possible now. The 6 months following my decision to cut off financial support were among the most emotionally challenging of my life. I cycled through anger, guilt, doubt, and grief, often questioning whether I had made the right decision. Was I being too harsh? Too unforgiving? Had I destroyed my family relationships beyond repair? To process these complex emotions, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Landon helped me understand that what I had experienced was financial abuse enabled by emotional manipulation. "Your generosity was exploited through systematic deception," she explained during one session. "Setting boundaries isn't punishment. It's self-protection, and ultimately healthier for everyone involved." Working with Dr. Landon, I came to recognize the unhealthy patterns that had defined our family since my father's death. Mom had channeled her grief and anxiety into overprotecting and indulging Brooke while placing excessive responsibility and expectations on me. This had created a dysfunctional dynamic where Brooke remained perpetually dependent and entitled while I was valued primarily for what I could provide rather than who I was. Financial support can be an expression of love, Dr. Landon noted, but when it becomes an expectation rather than a gift, the relationship becomes transactional rather than authentic. Meanwhile, I focused on strengthening genuine connections in Seattle. My colleague Wei became a close friend after we discovered a shared interest in hiking. We began exploring the mountain trails around Washington state on weekends, conversations flowing naturally as we navigated challenging terrain. Unlike my family relationships, this friendship was balanced with both of us contributing equally and supporting each other through professional and personal challenges. I also reconnected with my college roommate Alejandro, who had recently moved to Seattle with his wife and young daughter. They welcomed me into their home for weekly dinner gatherings, where the warmth and authentic affection stood in stark contrast to the manipulative dynamics I had experienced with my family. Their 4-year-old daughter Elena took a particular liking to me, dubbing me Uncle Marcus, and insisting I read her bedtime stories when I visited. "You're good with her," Alejandro observed one evening as I returned from tucking Elena in. "Ever think about having a family of your own?" The question gave me pause. "I think I need to heal my relationship with my existing family first," I admitted. "Or at least understand what went wrong so I don't repeat those patterns." 8 months after the financial cutoff, I felt stable enough to consider re-establishing contact with Mom on new terms. I called her on a Sunday afternoon, our traditional time for conversations in better days. "Marcus," she answered, her voice catching with surprise and emotion. "I'm so glad you called." Our conversation was awkward at first, both of us carefully avoiding the financial elephant in the room. We spoke about her work, my projects in Seattle, the changing seasons. Finally, I addressed what needed to be said. "Mom, I want to rebuild our relationship, but it needs to be based on honesty and mutual respect, not financial transactions." She was quiet for a moment before responding. "I understand that now. These past months have been difficult but necessary. I've had to face some hard truths about how I've treated you and the unhealthy dynamics I've enabled between you and Brooke." "How is Brooke?" I asked, genuinely curious about my sister's adjustment to her new reality. "Struggling but growing," Mom replied. "Her marriage to Ryan nearly ended when everything collapsed. They're in counseling now, learning to build a life based on what they can actually afford rather than appearances. She's working at the mall, which has been a humbling experience for her." "And you? How are you managing?" "I'm tired from working 2 jobs," she admitted, "but there's a strange satisfaction in supporting myself completely. I've even started a small savings account for retirement. It's not much yet, but it's a start." This conversation marked the beginning of a slow reconciliation process. I made it clear that I would not resume regular financial support, but I did take steps to ensure Mom's security and well-being through more structured means. Working with my financial advisor, I established a modest trust for Mom's eventual retirement with specific conditions that prevented the funds from being redirected to Brooke or Ryan. I also arranged for a local contractor to complete necessary repairs on the house, paying them directly rather than sending money that could be misappropriated. "The goal is to support your mother's actual needs while breaking the pattern of financial dependence," my advisor explained. "This approach provides security without enabling the dysfunctional dynamics." My relationship with Brooke took longer to address. 3 months after reconnecting with Mom, I finally called my sister. The conversation was tense, but ultimately productive. "I was angry at you for so long," she admitted. "It felt like you were punishing us by cutting off the money without warning." "It wasn't punishment," I explained carefully. "It was establishing a boundary that should have existed all along. The money was meant for Mom's well-being and security, not to fund a lifestyle that you and Ryan couldn't actually afford." "I know that now," she said quietly. "Ryan and I have had to completely reimagine our lives. We're selling the lake house property and using the money to pay down debt. He's working at the car dealership and I'm at the mall. It's not the life we pictured, but it's honest. That's all I ever wanted," I told her. "Not for you to struggle, but for our relationships to be based on truth rather than deception and exploitation." As the 1-year anniversary of my financial cutoff approached, I decided to visit Nebraska again. This time I stayed with Mom, sleeping in my old bedroom that now had a properly repaired roof overhead. The house was still modest, but there were small improvements that Mom had funded herself, a source of obvious pride for her. Brooke and Ryan came for dinner one evening, arriving in their used Toyota rather than the luxury vehicles they once drove. The conversation was occasionally strained, but there were moments of genuine connection that gave me hope for our future as a family. "I'm sorry for how I behaved," Brooke said as we washed dishes after the meal. I convinced myself that because you had money and we needed it, you somehow owed it to us. I never considered the breach of trust or how it affected you emotionally. And I enabled her, Mom added from where she was storing leftovers. I justified it as helping my daughter, but I was really avoiding the harder work of helping her grow up and face reality. These acknowledgments meant more to me than any repayment could have. They represented a fundamental shift in awareness and accountability, the necessary foundation for healthier relationships moving forward. Back in Seattle, I reflected on the painful but ultimately transformative journey of the past year. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about generosity, boundaries, and authentic connection. True support isn't about unlimited financial giving, but about encouraging growth, independence, and honesty. Sometimes the most loving action isn't providing resources, but rather removing the crutches that prevent someone from developing their own strength. I've learned that family relationships, like all relationships, need to be built on mutual respect and honesty to thrive. Money can be a form of caring, but when it becomes the primary language of love, something essential is lost. My worth isn't measured by what I can provide financially, but by who I am as a person, the values I uphold, and the authentic connections I build. The journey of healing continues for all of us. Mom is slowly building her independence. Brooke and Ryan are creating a life based on reality rather than appearances, and I am learning to trust again while maintaining healthy boundaries. We are reimagining what family means, moving from transactional relationships to connections based on genuine care and respect. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation being financially exploited by those who should love you unconditionally, know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone's growth. True love sometimes means saying no, even when it's difficult. Have you ever had to establish tough boundaries with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and the courage to stand up for yourself. Remember, sometimes the most powerful way to help someone is to stop helping them in ways that keep them from helping themselves. Thank you for listening to my journey.